So, what's going on in Gaza? Most of you have been following it. A lot of our audience knows about it. Starvation in Gaza is rising. There are images of babies clearly malnourished. Israeli operations have continued, although supposedly they are on a pause as we speak, but we don't know for how long. The UN has been warning that famine is playing out in Gaza. Forget the UN, forget international organizations. Now, Israeli organization, B'Tselem, I don't know how to pronounce it, and Physicians for Human Rights Israel have published two reports, significantly well-researched and documented, that say that Israel's conduct in the war in Gaza constitutes genocide against Palestinians. I know a number of Israeli officers and intelligence folks, so do you, Glenn. A lot of them have been saying privately that the war in Gaza should end, but the coalition government is beholden to the far right. And because Bibi Netanyahu wants to stick to power, he's applied some glue on the chair and sat down on it. He is not going to do anything that threatens his grip on power. So the domestic politics of Israel means that the conflict has continued. Now, there have been airdrops. Jordan and the UAE have dropped food supplies, humanitarian supplies. Aid agencies have strongly criticized these airdrops and said they've damaged houses, in fact, collapsed some of them. But the key thing here is that even Donald Trump sees real starvation in Gaza. When he sat down with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, he admitted that there was real starvation in Gaza, and he promised US aid. He suggested that Israel will preside over food aid distribution. So he seems to be cutting the UN out of the picture. So much so for international institutions created after 1945. Note the headquarters of the United Nations are in New York, not in Geneva, like the League of Nations. And Glenn, you were posted in New York, so you know the UN really well. The reality is that images of starving children, bombed out hospitals, and demolished homes have taken their toll. The tide of public opinion has turned in the two former imperial powers that drew up the lines of the modern Middle East. French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to recognize Palestine as a state. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that Britain would recognize, the UK would recognize a Palestinian state in September, unless Israel agreed to a ceasefire and a two-state solution. Now, obviously, both these countries were under domestic pressure. Public opinion had turned. In the UK, 130 MPs from Starmer's own Labour Party signed a letter urging such recognition. Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that this rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism. But the recognition by France, or the declaration of the recognition, and the ultimatum by the UK is a big deal, Glenn. So walk us through what this really means. Are these just words? Is this just a bunch of effete Europeans in an aging continent, as the Israelis say, flapping around? Their words are full of sound and fury, signifying nothing? Or is there something more going on?
I think both statements are true. It's always, diplomacy is always fuzzy and sort of haltingly backs into results that more straightforward uses of force sometimes can impose, although they will raise their own unintended consequences. It's true that France and England are largely impotent in this. Everybody's impotent except for Israel and the United States. That's just about it in deciding for the short and medium term what Israel's policies will be. I and many have said for ages that Trump clearly has allowed his foreign policy, at least with regard to the Middle East, to be determined in the among the right-wing parties of Israel and in the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, from the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has given a pass or
Yes, but
tacitly and openly
to be
supported
fair,
them.
sorry to interject, to be fair, there isn't much difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump on Gaza.
Well, okay, I think that's a good point. Yes, that is a good point. The U.S. fundamentally has always ultimately been played, to use maybe an unfair characterization, by Israel, because the U.S. position is that we must protect and will always support the independence and survival of Israel as a sovereign state, and therefore Israel has been able to get away with more or less whatever it has wanted to do. That is true. And Trump has expressed some frustration. I think the assessment of the last 2 years, or I guess we should say 6 months, is that Netanyahu has succeeded in doing most of what he's wanted, and has played Trump to enable it. More specifically, for the largely, frankly, performative, but also with some substantive consequence, attack by the U.S. On Iran. And now I think the implications of what's happening with the aid or lack of aid to Gaza and the deaths there, leading to France and England's, Great Britain's decisions, is a de facto progressive, slow pushing out of the Gazans, the Palestinians, from Gaza. Netanyahu is careful enough, and probably hasn't made that decision to do himself, to say that no, anyone who wishes to leave voluntarily, of course, they should be allowed to do that, but we aren't forcing anybody. Well, you aren't forcing them, except that their population is starving and all the buildings are rubble, and the area that they can even have a tent grows narrower every day. And we do know that the right-wing parties explicitly seek to retrieve Gaza for greater Israel. That's been a millennial objective, multi-millennial. And de facto, this
On that
seems to
note,
be occurring.
both of us should give a shout out to Alan Waring, our British friend, who's published Tour de Force, quoting Israeli ministers. Now, you may agree or disagree with Alan, but what he's done is he's taken primary statements or primary evidence of what cabinet members have actually said to draw out this long-term plan. Over to you, Glenn.
There are some similarities. I don't want to be anyone to think I'm being flippant or facetious. I really am not, or too broad brush. Some similarities between the de facto evolution of events by the Israeli government with regard to the Gazans, Palestinians, and how history unfolded in the United States with Americans and Indians, Native Americans. Sometimes there were factions who said we have to kill every Indian and eliminate them. The only good Indian is a dead Indian, unquote. More said that that's a horrible thing, and of course you can't do that. We have to be humane to them, all while thinking, believing, acting in such a way that it was impossible to stop increasing settlement on lands that had thereto only been inhabited, if ever, by Indians, by Native Americans. The result was there are no more Indians, essentially. Well, of course, there are Indians in America, but their reign ended, and they were pushed out, pushed away, constrained, and now we have the world we have. And that seems to be de facto, if not de jure, the policy of the Israeli government now. It's the explicit policy, as I say, of the far right. So what consequence do Great Britain and France's decisions have? I think it can have, over time, and this is what diplomacy, I think, can achieve. It can shift the center of acceptable ideal that you're striving towards, or it's no longer a pie in the sky of only the Palestinians or the Muslims that the Palestinians should have a state. So in that sense, it's a substantive change. But the only two nations that can really affect Israel's policies are Israel and the US. So in a practical sense, probably for the foreseeable future, it won't have much consequence.
All right. I think the key consequence here is very simple. Bit by bit, Israel has been losing goodwill around the world. Bit by bit, the number of states that support Israel have been going down. Yes, Germany is still backing Israel to the hilt. In fact, Chancellor Christopher Merz said that, Israel is doing our work. But Germany has guilt, has guilt for the Holocaust. Other countries are moving away because they're increasingly seeing this as some form of ethnic cleansing or genocide. The takeover of the far right of the government in Israel is causing immense damage, not just externally, but internally. The divisions within Israeli society, I think, are more important. The fact that Israeli groups came out with reports is significant. Remember that before October 7, 2023, they had horrific, violent, and brutal attacks by Hamas. There were protests on the streets against Bibi Netanyahu's government. Secular Jews and the far-right religious Jews are increasingly at loggerheads. A lot of officers in the Israeli Defense Forces believe that the time has come to stop operations in Gaza and focus on Iran, because Iran may try something sneaky, something huge, as someone would say, soon. So the divisions in Israel itself will increase because a lot of these secular Israeli Jews value Europe culturally, and the loss of support in Europe for Israel will be significant psychologically, if not practically. Also, anti-Semitism is increasing, and now that the two states have moved against, or rather have moved for recognizing Palestine, not necessarily against Israel, I clarify, their own populations, especially the immigrant Muslim populations, whether they are of Pakistani origin in the UK or Bangladeshi origin or of North African origin, will also feel more emboldened. So there are consequences, and the consequences are significant, and some of them are what Donald Rumsfeld, Rumsfeld called the unknown unknowns. So there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and I think there are known unknowns, but there'll be unknown unknowns, and this is more significant than just the diplomatic fallout.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.